Okay, great. Thanks, Brandon. I'd like to thank you and Joe and everyone have set this up. It's kind of a unique format that gives us a little more time. This is a lot better than the typical eight-minute presentation we sometimes get on these. So we look forward to this. Encourage people to have some questions for us, either at the end of this session, or please feel free to contact us by setting up a one-to-one in what's left of this meeting, or you can also reach out to us in any of a number of ways. There's quite a bit more information on our website as well, particularly for the technical aspects of the presentation. What we're going to do today is a little bit different format than you might be accustomed to. This is kind of a quick hitting top 10 reasons to invest in Regulus. It's designed to be a presentation to give you an overall introduction to it and hit the highlights, and then we can follow up with questions as we go forward. At Regulus, we're a group of seasoned explorationists. We specialize in finding large copper or copper gold deposits, capturing those, drilling those out, de-risking those, and then ideally selling those to a major mining company. We've had previous success in our predecessor company, Antares Minerals, and we're on to a really interesting project with our AntaKori project in Regulus right now. There are very few of these really large, what are referred to as Tier 1 copper or copper gold deposits, particularly in the hands of juniors that are undeveloped. And when we get into metal price cycles like we're seeing with gold and what we believe we'll see with copper in the not too distant future, companies get cashed up, they get aggressive, they look for new development opportunities. And what we specialize is finding those and delivering them to them at the right moment. And we think there's a lot of reason to believe that we're onto a good one, and the timing could be really good. We are traded in TSX-V, and we're also traded in the Lima exchange, so the appropriate disclaimers apply to this. So we'll jump right into the top reasons to invest. So reason number one is that our team has a history of success, and particularly success in Peru, where we're working right now. Our predecessor company was called Antares Minerals. Utilizing the same business plan that we have right now, we captured the Haquira deposit, drilled that out, and sold it to First Quantum Minerals for $650 million. So we've done this before. We're experienced at what we do, and we're on to a business model that's been proven successful. This gives just a highlight of how the Antares story played out for us, in that we captured the Haquira project. It went off to the races in 2007 when we started drilling really nice holes on it. We experienced a black swan event with a financial crisis in 2008, 2009, which took us from over $5 a share down to 37 cents pretty quickly, but continued to work on the project. And as the market recovered, we delivered a PEA and a new resource in mid-2010, and that triggered the sale to First Quantum. The reason I've shown this is the type of return that can come from our business model. And it's also interesting that in many ways we've kind of experienced a similar event with COVID recently, where we've seen a big drop off in the market. Now the market's recovering, particularly strongly for gold companies, but we believe copper companies will go through the same upturn in the very near future. Reason number two is that management has skin in the game, and we have a very favorable share structure. We have one large shareholder in Route 1. That's a cornerstone investor with about 24% of the company. They backstop on us on many of the things that we do. And as management and directors, we have over 13% of the company. We also participate very actively. This is not a legacy position that we've inherited. This is one that we participate in virtually every financing that happens in open market purchases. As management, we've put more than $2.6 million in the last 2 years into the company and various opportunities. Highlight number three on this is location. Location is critical for projects, and the AntaKori project is very well located in northern Peru. We're on the left-hand side, we can see we're in a stretch of the Andes. It's extremely well endowed with both very large copper and very large gold deposits. Most of the copper deposits have significant gold associated with them. If we look on the right-hand side of the diagram a little more closely at the project area, we can see the project is located about 2.5 hours north of the city of Cajamarca. Cajamarca is a good hub with lots of skilled labor because there are quite a number of active mines around the project. It's a paved road out to the project because the road passes directly through the Yanacocha mine, the largest gold mine in South America, operated by Newmont and with a joint venture partner of Buenaventura. And we're immediately adjacent to two operating mines, the Tantuatay mine and the Cerro Corona mine. So location is really critical. Point number four is that there is a clear path line to monetization. If we look at the diagram on the left side of this slide, The land position that we own 100% are the red claims, and we have an option to acquire up to a 70% interest in the pink blocks on this. So we're consolidating a large land position on the north side of the Tantahuatay mine. The Tantahuatay mine is operated by a joint venture called Comalaiche, which has three partners: Southern Copper, which is Grupo Mexico's Peruvian subsidiary, so large or top 5 copper company in the world, in partnership with Buenaventura and with a small family company called Espro. So three parties together operating a joint venture, and they're currently mining the oxide cap over a large copper gold sulphide deposit. So it's a heap leach gold operation immediately next door to us. They're pre-stripping the cap off of a much larger copper gold sulphide deposit at depth. That same deposit extends onto our ground. So we have a portion of a much larger deposit that's shared with the neighbors. And this is clearly an opportunity for a district consolidation to produce a transition from a fairly profitable medium-sized heap leach gold operation into a much larger copper gold operation. And we view that we have a key component to that. The oxides next door run out in 2025. And the partnership there is already beginning to make their plans on how to make a transition from the heap leach oxide mine to a larger copper gold sulphide mine at depth. And as I mentioned, we hold a key piece to that happening. Meanwhile, 7 kilometers to the southeast is the Cerro Corona mine, owned and operated by Goldfields, one of their top projects worldwide, but also one that has an estimated closure. In 2025, they run out of tailing space and they begin to process low-grade stockpile. So both of these mines are very profitable mines, but have short remaining mine life and are very much keyed towards how to make a transition into a much longer life in the future for the project. Continuing on the same theme of a timeline for monetization, this is just one of many ways to show the supply copper situation for copper coming up. I think most people are well aware that as an industry, we're not very good at discovering new copper deposits and particularly putting them into production. And at the same time, there's a strong increase in demand for copper, primarily due to electrification of just about every aspect of our life right now. This will produce a distinct supply gap in the not too distant future. COVID doesn't really change that. It kicks it out maybe slightly, but arguably might even exacerbate the gap when it opens up. So there's a very good case for copper to soon enter into a supply shortage, which would logically result in a price increase. We've all been watching the tremendous run that gold's been on right now. I think there's an even better case for a copper story coming quite soon now. If we move to the next slide, on our next point on point 5 is that we already have a large resource in hand. We've been drilling on this project for the last 3 years. We put out our first interim resource last year. That's in the small box in the lower right-hand side of the diagram. Between indicated and inferred mineralization, we have over 500 million tons of mineralization at a copper equivalent grade of about 0.7. So relatively good grade on this, with a nice gold component to the copper mineralization. This is dominantly a copper project, but with very significant gold and silver byproducts. To put this into perspective, straight copper metal, there's over 5 billion pounds contained in the project. Straight gold is 4.5 million ounces of gold, and silver is over 100 million ounces. So this is a large resource to already start with. But if we move to point, or another important aspect of this resource is that it's not just a large resource and relatively high grade. This is a point that we've appreciated a little bit more in the last few months as we've had more time to take a look at the project and cut our resource up into pieces. We can see the resource in the cross section on this diagram. This resource, it shows several things. We can only show the portion of the resource that's on our ground. We see what's on the neighbor's ground. We can utilize that data to constrain our resource, but we cannot report it. And visually, you can see in the cross section that there's a lot of very good high grade quite close to the surface. And the strip ratio on this project is remarkably low. In the left-hand side, we can see the inferred and indicated resources broken out by grade and depth from the surface. And we can see that much of the deposit is close to the surface. This results in a very low strip ratio with high grade very much up front in the project. That will undoubtedly translate to very positive economics when we're to the point that we can start to wrap PEA or pre-feasibility around this project. So we're very much anxious to get to that point in the future where we can show this, but the geologic indicators in both are all size, grade, and particularly low strip are quite attractive. By low strip, the strip ratio on the resource that we report is 0.85, so less than 1-to-1. That includes our mineralization and the mineralization that's within the pit on the neighbor's ground. So this is a very attractive deposit in terms of strip ratio. We can see this a little bit better in this diagram on point 7, is that our resource is it's quite a large resource by itself already right now, but that's part of a much larger resource when we take a look at what is on the neighbor's ground. In the diagram on the left side, we can see our land position, so the 100% land position in red, the option to earn up to 70% in pink. To the southwest or lower left side of this diagram is the mine, the joint venture, the Coimolache Joint Venture's land position in 2 shades of gray. We have an agreement with the mine that allows us to see their data and use their data to constrain our resource and to float a pit back onto their ground, lay back onto their ground. So the black line is the outline of the conceptual pit that constrains our resource. But the resource that we report that we just talked about is only that which occurs inside the pit and on our red claims. You can see much of the pit is onto the neighbor's ground, and it makes sense that that would be largely mineralized or the pit would not float onto that ground. The most recent, we see what's in the pit on their side, we just can't report what that is for both reasons due to our agreement with the neighbors and also for exchange purposes. However, the most recent resource that they've publicly reported on their ground, not necessarily in this pit, but on their ground overall, is over 900 million tons at quite similar grades to what we have. So if we look on the bar charts on the right-hand side of the diagram, we can see the current AntaKori resource at about 8 billion pounds of copper equivalent. I emphasize that that's an interim resource. That's a resource that could be much larger as we continue to drill on the project. When we combine that with the most recently reported resource on the neighbor's ground, we get the second bar on the chart, which puts it over 25 billion pounds of copper equivalent. This puts this project into the scale of Toromocho or Las Bambas, 2 large projects that have been recently developed in Peru. They're clearly tier 1 projects, the type that even the largest mining companies would be looking for, and considerably larger than our Haquira deposit that we successfully sold to First Quantum in our first time around. I have also put Cascabel on this project, the large Sol Gold project in Ecuador, for reference. So we can see that what we have is part of an even larger project overall. If we move to point number 8, this project has delivered some of the more exciting copper or copper gold drill intercepts over the last couple of years. This is a diagram that shows the top drill intercepts reported by junior companies since 2018. They're ordered by copper equivalent meters, or so copper grade times the meter length. To make this diagram, you have to have long runs of very good grade mineralization. We have 5 of the top holes that have been reported during this period of time. Holes of, we can see holes over 600 meters of quite attractive 1.66 copper equivalent grade to this. So these are long runs of very high grade mineralization. The only company or project that's consistently delivering better results than we have has been Sol Gold's Cascabel project in Ecuador. But we like to point out that most of our drill intercepts start very close to the surface, whereas most of their drill intercepts start at up to 1 kilometer depth. The Cascabel project is an opportunity for a large copper gold bulk underground mine, whereas AntaKori is an opportunity for a large copper gold open pit mine. Very, very different. And also AntaKori is located in Peru, a more established mining country, and Cascabel and Sol Gold are in Ecuador, which is an emerging country for mining activities at this scale. Another important thing about this diagram is 3 of the holes are indicated with red dots on the left-hand side of the diagram. Those 3 holes did not contribute to our most recent resource estimate. 2 of them were drilled after we reported the resource. 1 was in hand at the time of the resource, but was completely by itself, so didn't have drill hole support. So we've continued to drill holes beyond when we last reported our resource, and are clearly adding additional mineralization to go forward. So point number 9 is we've already established that we have a really large resource. It's part of a much larger resource when we combine it with the neighbors, but we're really just getting started on the story. There's potential for our resource to continue to grow, particularly to the north side of the project. On this diagram, we're looking at this is ground magnetic information. When we process this information in the manner that this has been processed, and we see these annular signatures with a central low and a high that surrounds that, that's a classic signature of a porphyry or porphyry skarn type system. To date, we've only been able to drill up to the line of drill holes that are labeled AK 35, 34, 41, 26, 39. Those are the northernmost holes we've been able to drill to date with the permits that we have in hand. In February, just before COVID hit, we received our permits to allow us to step to the north to test this very exciting geophysical feature. It's a part of the project we refer to as Antanorte, and COVID came along and stopped that drilling. So we're currently setting up the plans and working with the local communities on how we can safely recommence drilling. We anticipate that drilling will start in September. But these last holes to the north, you can see the drill intercepts on the right-hand side of the diagram. More than half, over 60% of the drill meterage that we've drilled off to the north, testing the edge of this target, has hit reportable mineralization. So we're very excited about starting drilling again here in another month or so and being able to step to the north and test these targets. To look at this a little more closely, we're looking at a cross-section now looking to the northwest. We can see the conceptual pit that outlines our resource. We can see the part of the resource that's on our ground. It's blanked out on the neighbor's ground. We can see the Tantuatai oxide mine pre-stripping material on their side, exposing the sulphides that they have at depth, which continue onto our ground. And the mineralization is very much open to the right or to the north into the Antanorte sector. There's mineralization that's below the pit right now that's classified but does not report as resource because it's outside the pit. We anticipate with additional drilling to the north, with success on that drilling, that will convert the known mineralization that's hanging below the pit as well as encounter new mineralization to the north. I'm now going to take that same magnetic information and superimpose it on this same diagram. So we can see here on the right-hand side of the diagram is that magnetic information on the surface, the distinct annular ring. And we can see these magnetic targets at depth that have not been, they're just the southern fringe of these have been tested to date with relatively exciting results. So we're very anxious to begin drilling these literally in the next month or so as we step to the north. And finally, point number 10 of most importance to investors on this is that right now is an outstanding time to take a look at Regulus in terms of valuation. We've been through COVID and we've been through a period of time when we haven't been able to produce much information about the project. And that's resulted as a copper dominant project kind of falling off the map. It produces a situation where we're currently very undervalued even for the resource that we have in hand. And then particularly when you add that potential for additional resource to the north, it's an outstanding entry point. In many ways, I look at this as similar to what happened to our Antares story when we were on a great discovery and the financial crisis came in 2008, 2009, knocked everything to the ground, and it produced an entry point for people with much more information on the project. We're in the same boat now. You can get in on this project at prices that are similar to 3 years ago, but we have a resource in hand and the project's much more advanced. This diagram shows the enterprise value per pound of copper in the ground for the existing resource. We're currently valued at less than a penny a pound. On this, some of our competitors on this diagram are valued more than that. You can see those. And typically, in our experience, if you take a look at all of the assets of this character that have been sold over the last 15 years or so, a more typical average price for acquisition of this type asset is about 4 cents a pound. So just on the resource in hand, we have an opportunity to de-risk the project, move it towards the point of an eventual sale, and we anticipate that would be a significant increase from our current market cap and share price. And then we have the potential for substantial increase. So I'll finish with just a bit of a preview on what's coming up. As I mentioned, we have those Antanorte permits. They came in early this year just before we had to shut down. So the key thing to watch for with us right now is the restart of the phase 2 drill program. We anticipate that will be in September. There'll be news out very shortly on the details of the startup on that program. So by the end of 2020, we'll have those initial resorts from Antanorte. We have been able to work on our metallurgical results. The lab's been able to work during the down period, so you'll see those by the end of the year. And then as we move into 2021, in the early part of 2021, we anticipate that you'll see an updated resource, and we anticipate that'll be a fairly substantial increase. And then we'll be during 2021, we'll be moving the project forward, de-risking the project, and moving it into traditional feasibility type levels, including economic evaluations of the project. Depending what we find to the north on this Anta Norte program, these are scout holes into this new area. We undoubtedly will not have enough drilling to convert that to mineralization if we have success there. So that would be a phase 3 drill program throughout most of next year to continue to convert that. So approximately annual updates on the resource estimate and moving this project forward. And in summary, what we're doing is we're strengthening our hand. We're increasing our position within the district for what we anticipate will be an eventual consolidation in the district. So thank you very much for your time. And I think it's a good time to open up for questions now. And if we'll get as many questions in as we can. And if there are other questions we don't answer, please feel free to contact us. The information's on our website or on the presentation. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And John, I appreciate, I've been telling everyone all day to go enjoy their coffee, sit down. I finally got to enjoy my coffee and sit down and watch that. So I appreciate that very much and taking the time for this. But why don't we jump over to the questions? Quite a few have come in. So we'll start from the very first one here. Jason is asking, are you concerned about any of the recent political changes in Peru impacting your operations?
No, actually, most of the changes recently have been quite positive. The current president of the country is one who assumed the position midterm. And so he has about 1 year left. And as we enter into the last year of a presidency, there's often cabinet changes. And that's been further exacerbated by the COVID situation. At first, it was viewed they were handling it very well. Now there's some critics of how that's happened. So for us in the mining space, it's resulted in a series of changes of mining ministers over the last several months. There have been 4 mining ministers this year. But all of the appointees have been skilled mining people. We're not seeing bureaucrats from other parts of the government. The new nominee or the new mining minister is Miguel Inchuaste, and he's somebody we know well. He actually worked at Goldfields next door to us for a long time and knows our area well. So he's a mining guy. He understands it. And there's been very good continuity in the mining ministry with emphasis on streamlining things, improving the time it takes for us to get permits, and we're all seeing positive changes in that. One of the key things, or one of the hindrances for us in Peru over the last couple of years is it's been increasingly slow to get your permits. They happen, but it takes a long time. They're making notable efforts to streamline that and move it forward much more quickly now. So I think that's going to be one of the positive outcomes from the COVID situation.
Gotcha, and I appreciate that. This next investor, Frank, is asking somewhat along the same lines, but more so just about the location. Are you able to drill your project year-round?
Yes, we can drill this project year-round. The project's located at about a 4,000 meter elevation, but that's fairly standard for Andean terms on this. And we have the 2 mines immediately adjacent to us, plus Yanacocha down the road. So there's no issue about operating all year round. Because we're fairly north in Peru, we don't see snow. It's on very rare occasions we see any snow. What we have is about 4 months of wet season, and the rest of the year is the drier season. The wet season complicates things. It slows us down a little bit. We lose some time primarily managing safety issues around lightning. But there's particularly in a developed site like this, there are no issues about access. We can and have drilled year round.
Gotcha. Thank you. This next one is from Nigel. John, you highlight 2025 as a clear path to monetization. However, do you feel that could happen much sooner as you progress through the drill programs and get a PEA out?
That's an excellent question, and one we've internally debated. When we put that 2025, we're emphasizing that's a key year to make the transition to sulphides. For that to happen successfully, we would anticipate the party or group that decides to take the consolidated district forward has to take steps well before that. So we would like another year or 2 on this project to fully drill it out and de-risk it and show the true value of the project. But we would anticipate in the next, say, 2 years, as we get that done, we'll start to see that copper gap open up, and we'll start to see forward-looking companies make decisions about how to position themselves well ahead of that 2025. So I don't mean to imply that's a point for us. It's a deadline for the district to make a transition.
Absolutely. The next question we have here, I had a similar question to Nigel. Do you think you could get this project sold with just a PEA, or do you think you would need something like a full feasibility study completed?
Another good question. When we set up as a junior company, Kevin, Heather, and myself came from experience with major mining companies in most of our first half of our careers. And we were asked about forming a junior company, and you need to decide what style of company you're going to be. Is it going to be grassroots? And we settled on the business model that we use primarily because of many more decades than we care to admit of time on the ground in South America. We had ideas about projects that were out there that we could acquire and move more quickly to putting our hands on a project. So it's a business model that's probably been most successfully executed by Lumina Copper. They've discovered and sold probably 5 or 6 of these, but the Lundin Group and the Augusta Group and others do similar things. And the common theme is it's all experienced geologists that are putting their hands on very good projects that we know would be the type that major mining companies would like to do. And when we take a look at all of the success stories in that space, most typically the sweet spot is around a pre-feasibility study. And that's the point where as ourselves as a junior company, we feel we've added a lot of value from this point of discovery up to about pre-feasibility. There's a very steep value add on the life trajectory of a junior type diagram on this. But if you go beyond pre-feasibility, you're really moving more into mine development stage. And sometimes that involves much more expenses. We call it the valley of death because it's oftentimes, particularly if you're a sole asset company, it's difficult to move. So we look at that pre-feasibility as kind of the sweet spot, both from our standpoint and from the acquirer. It's the point where the project is de-risked. They have the most confidence that it'll go forward. Having said that, on our first experience with Haquira, we felt that we were moving towards a pre-feasibility. We put out a positive PEA. At that time, we had 26 companies looking at Haquira. And most of the more serious ones were encouraging us to go to pre-feas as we predicted. But First Quantum, for internal reasons and timing on where they were at, decided that they were comfortable at a PEA. So we sold Haquira at a PEA. And the good projects a lot of times will go earlier, particularly if the metal price cycles are up. No matter what you do with a project, you need to have buyers in a position where they're cashed up. And we're clearly seeing the gold companies move into that space now. And we're seeing the forward-looking copper companies project that they're going to need these projects. And if we see copper price move very much here, they're going to be in a position where they're going to be hunting hard as well. So we between PEA and pre-feas. The other issue on this project is that it's a little more complex in terms of the neighbors are already at that level. They don't wear it publicly. They keep a lot of it internally. And we'll have some challenges on how we properly present the combined project because we can't show data on their side and how we go forward. So a lot of that type work is done under confidentiality agreements.
Gotcha. And I heard you say copper there, which is one of our next questions. We'll get right back to the one that was just before this question, but just let this flow really nicely. Miko asks, what if copper takes a nosedive after the world realizes a V-shaped recovery is not a reality? How would this scenario affect your company?
Well, it doesn't affect our long-term game at all. I think the fundamentals in the copper space are quite good if we're projecting out on time on this. A downturn in copper, just like a downturn in gold, even what we're experiencing in the last day or two, can affect gold companies in the short term. That would most likely affect short-term sentiment in a copper story like this. So it can affect our access to capital. But that's where having one key cornerstone shareholder is important that will always be backing us as we go through. So we'll have access to capital and keep the project moving forward and keep moving it to that point. It's very similar to what happened to us with Antares. The bottom dropped out on us. We thought it was the end of the world. And less than a year and a half later, we sold the project for what we felt was full valuation for us. And so we think this recovery will come back. If it drops out in the short term, that has a temporary short-term effect on us, but doesn't affect our long-term view on this. A few other thoughts on that is that we are seeing China and other groups embark on major infrastructure programs and things that will likely consume copper or have demands for copper. A total recession globally on this would affect everything, of course, on this, but we saw that in 2008, 2009, and how that recovered pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can already start seeing it, not to go too off topic, but you can see China already going to various different places all around the world and wanting to build bridges, wanting to have assets, wanting to buy natural resources from various countries. So they're still very much, they think in decades, not in years or months.
Absolutely.
The next one here is from Joanne. She says, as you mentioned, you saw the previous property to Equinox. Are you applying the same strategy here, or do you want to take it to production?
We're a group that's very good at identifying these opportunities and exploring them and showing the full potential. By nature, our company isn't a developer on this. And when you have a sole asset on this, taking it to production yourself can result in eventually building a bigger company, but it doesn't necessarily have the best return for your shareholders on that. So our preferred strategy on this would be to do just what we did with Antares and Haquira, and what our strategy is overall is to show the full dimensions of the project, de-risk it, show it as an economically viable opportunity to go forward, and we focus on identifying very, very large deposits. So we intentionally don't look for a small deposit. We look for the type of deposit that would be of interest to a major company. And that's so that if it's large enough and economically robust enough, they can afford to buy and build. We view that a trap for many junior companies is that if you find a 1 million ounce gold deposit, the major companies aren't going to be, it's too small of a project for them. They're not going to be interested in doing that. And it may be economically viable to put forward, but it's not so viable or so large that somebody can afford to buy it and build it. And so in that situation, you're trapped to going into production yourself. And that works great if metal prices are up, but you're moving into an area that you're not experienced as a company, and you're moving into an area that requires a lot more capital. And we just see things not go well for a lot of companies in that space. So we'd very much prefer to monetize the project earlier and get it into the hand. The baton pass we did to First Quantum was very typical of what we do. First Quantum specializes in acquiring projects and building them. And so that's what they're looking for. And so it kind of takes the project and moves as you advance stages, as it moves it into the hands of the more appropriate company to take it forward.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point you said there as well of handcuffing yourself, or potentially handcuffing yourself, or having to take that and having to become a producer because it's grown so big, or you're working on it for so long. Now it's hard to buy that out and produce it. It's a very, very interesting point. I'm not sure I wanted to repeat it just in case one of our investors or someone watched this missed that point. The next question here is also speaking of a potential sale. Can you disclose whether you have any interest from any other major mining companies regarding your current project?
We have to respect confidentiality when we enter into this type of area, but the way we can describe it right now is that a project like this, when we put out the resource that we put out, and with the geologic characteristics it has and where it's located and everything, that any major mining company that's doing its job properly should be monitoring that. And so we have received a lot of inquiries from major companies, and we typically enter into a confidentiality agreement with the companies that allows them to take a much deeper review of the project. And so the project's entering, as I mentioned with Haquira, I think we ended up with 26 companies under CA. At this stage, I won't disclose how many, but it's a significant number right now that are already under CA on this. Many are just doing due diligence and monitoring. They're not all necessarily extremely interested, but it results in very good interaction for us because we get feedback on what they're looking for, what they want to see, advice, free metallurgical advice, things like that from groups on that. It allows us to kick tires or kick ideas around about potential strategic investors and situations like that. Just to give an indication of the type demand, we participate in the BMO conference in February, which is one of the in the way we used to do conferences. It was one of the best conferences that you can go to out there, and then followed up with PDAC. And we had a number of inbound inquiries from groups to do that. So as a consequence of that, we blocked out 2 periods of time each month from March through June when we would have our senior management on site to host site visits, because the pattern is typically you sign a CA and then they send a technical team to review the project in the field. Of course, we couldn't do that. But we found that we can actually host virtual site visits of the project on Zoom conferences or similar conferences right now. So we've hosted quite a number of these over the last couple months, where we'll have 3 or 4 hour technical sessions with technical teams from major companies diving into all aspects of the projects, and they're quite interesting, quite fun, and we've actually been able to do much more than we would have thought we could in the virtual world, similar to conferences like this. So a couple other observations we can make on this is that, as I mentioned, copper will be the driving metal on this project. That's depending on what prices you want to use. It's the larger portion of the value in the project, and will always drive the nature of the project. But this project has a lot of gold associated with that copper and silver as well. And so what we're seeing is the copper companies are always interested in projects like this, but we've seen a noticeable increase in the number of gold companies that are taking a look at projects like this. And it's partly because, and I can point to things like Barrick, where Mark Bristow's publicly telegraphed that they're interested in taking on more copper with projects on this, but we hear the same story from all the major gold companies on this. And when they say that, they're looking to copper potentially as a hedge for gold on this. If gold dropped off and copper came up, you have a natural hedge that way. But in detail, what we're really seeing as we talk to them more is what they're really interested in is large, long mine lives. And as you start to see these larger gold companies get to the size where they're replacing 5 or 6 million ounces a year, it's very hard to do that with small 10-year mine lives. You're always starting and stopping, and it's a lot of management. If you don't get it timed right on your prices, it doesn't work well. So they would prefer to have fewer, larger, longer mine lives. It's just easier to build a big company over a long period of time. And so large porphyry copper deposits with significant gold credits, or skarns or high sulfidation systems, offer the opportunity for them to participate in a much longer mine life. And not necessarily by themselves. They can do that in conjunction with, say, a copper company and a gold company teaming up to take on a large copper gold operation this way. So the reason they like these long mine lives, in addition to being easier to build a company around it, is it's much easier to handle socially. We refer to them as multi-generational mines. These are mines that will operate for 50, 60 years or more. And it's a lot easier to build hospitals and schools and lasting infrastructure around a project like that. Too many mines that are 10 years result in a great economic boom, but then you have the bust on the back end of it that you have to manage out. So these assets, like what we have at AntaKori, are very attractive to the major companies.
Yeah, some phenomenal points in there. I appreciate that. Very, very detailed answer on that question. Next one here is from Richard, and he says, so why do you think you're undervalued, even if just considering resources on hand?
That's a good question on this. We tend to be a very technically oriented group that focuses on the end game. We're not a group that's intentionally trying to move our share price tomorrow for the benefit of day trading and things like that. And so we kind of fall back into being technical guys that focus on the project and the value of the project. And we sometimes don't do as well as we could in getting the story out there and getting that picked up by more people. Our share structure is very tight between management and Route 1 and many of our other shareholders. There's not a lot of liquidity to the story. So it kind of flies under the radar in that sense on it. More recently, copper stories have kind of taken back seat as people are understandably chasing some of the spectacular things we've seen happening in the gold space. But we're starting to see more indications of people that are keeping their eye on copper as perhaps a good entry point now. It's the point where you can buy low on, not just ourselves, there are a number of other stories that are in a similar situation to this. And so smart long-term money is starting to position in copper to have that same benefit when it runs that we've seen in the gold space right now. We also had some details of some. We had one large fund position sell out on us late last year and into the first part of this year without arranging anything with us on it. They just sold into the open market over time, and that put a lot of steady pressure on us right as we were going into COVID and everything else. So it's kind of a series of things resulted in our share price being beat up, and that's beginning to recover right now. And we view the trigger of getting back to drilling and getting back to news flow on this is going to be the point when things pick back up and be. So it's a great time to position yourself in front of that right now.
Absolutely. Appreciate once again that answer. This next one is from Jason. He's asking, can you provide a bit more detail on the drilling program? Things like how many rigs or maybe the area of focus?
Okay. Well, there'll be a note out very shortly on this as we nail down the details of working. Where we're at right now is Peru, despite having a strong increase in cases. COVID is a quite serious issue in most of South America right now. It's wintertime. It's the height of the traditional influenza or flu season. So they're experiencing a lot of cases popping up, and that causes a lot of concern. But at the same time, it's critical that the country opens up and begins to work. So projects like ourselves are now able to go back to work in the terms of government restrictions. Those have been lifted so we can get back to work. But we want to make sure that as we start back to work, that all of our stakeholders, particularly the communities that we work in and near, are comfortable that we're doing it in a safe way. A lot of these small mountain towns are concerned about outsiders bringing in COVID to their communities with real concern on that. So we're carefully working with them to show how we will set up our camps, how we'll isolate, how we'll monitor health, and do things like that. So it's taking just a little bit to get that set up. We anticipate we'll be able to go in September. We'll start on the new permit to the north, because those are the targets we've been all anxious to get on and drill up there. We will do that with 2 rigs, but we'll start with 1 rig. Independent of a COVID crisis or other, we like to ease into a program. It's just safer to start with 1, make sure things are working, then add the 2nd rig and go forward. So we'll take it up to 2 rigs drilling on the Anta Norte part of the project. The mine, we have a little bit of drilling to do from the mine still. Currently, the mine is really, really tight on space because the protocols for them to operate means that they have fewer bunk spaces and things like that. And so they don't even allow their own exploration team to drill right now, but they're taking steps to improve amount of space in the mine. And we anticipate by maybe October, November, we'll be able to put 1 rig on the mine. So by the end of the year, we'll probably be up to 3 rigs overall. And what we're doing is our phase 1 program, which was about 23,000 meters, led to our first resource update. We're halfway through our phase 2 program right now. So the drill program that we'll kick off here next month will be the continuation of phase 2, which is enough drilling on that northern side, just stepping into the new area to provide a resource update, and the first holes into the targets to the north. If we have success, as we anticipate we will on the targets to the north, that will be a phase 3 program. So we'll, at some point late this year, early next year, we'll cut off our phase 2 and prepare an updated resource, which we'd anticipate in the first half of 2021, but most likely continuing directly into a phase 2 program. So the remainder of the phase 2 program right now it'll be between 6,000 and 15,000 meters, depending a little bit how it plays out on that. And then the data cutoff comes, and then we enter into a phase 3, as yet undefined, but most likely on the order of 15 or 20,000 meters of drilling.
Obviously, once again, a very detailed answer. I appreciate taking the time to go into such depth for these questions. I'm sure those asking them appreciate that as well. Our last question for this presentation today is from Roman, and I know I'm going to get this word in here wrong, so forgive me in advance, but he asks, can you please update the relationship with Comelotch, i.e. the rights on REG land?
Okay, great. When we acquired this project, as we saw on the land map, it's a collage of old claims. So they're not even north-south claims. They're historic claims that were mined in the 1940s to about the 1970s on it. And we knew there was mineralization on those grounds. We knew the geology was such that there was potential for a lot more mineralization on those. But we had a bit of a conundrum in the sense that because it was a fragmented land position and all interfingered with the Coimolache JV next door, it was very difficult for us to even do additional exploration on that ground, and likewise for them on it. So essentially we were sharing a deposit, and we were kind of at a standoff on how we could move forward. So we entered into an agreement that's a rather unusual, rather innovative agreement, in my opinion, with them, that's best described as a collaborative exploration agreement. And so we create an area of interest that includes our ground and a 500-meter layback onto the mine ground around us. And within that area of interest, we share all of our data. So they see all of our data, we see all of their data. We share access. If they have a permit, we're allowed to use it to get to our ground, and vice versa. We literally have drill holes that are partially on their ground and partially on our ground, and we each pay for our proportion. And it was designed really to be an agreement that just allowed us to move the project forward and find out. If we each knew what we had, we would probably already be negotiating some sort of a purchase or a joint venture or something moving forward. But quite frankly, we each think we have the better part of it right now. And the only way to solve that was to enter into this agreement that allows us to move forward and fully show what we have, which has been the benefit to us. So that relationship is working well. It's not without its challenges on who does what when and how much, do we get a bunk space in the mine or not and stuff like that. But it's allowed us to move the project forward. It was a critical step in what we did on this. Now the agreement also has some additional details that would allow either party to say, hey, we've seen enough. We just want to make a big mine out of this. And so in the case of Coimolache, they could say, we want to make a mine. We're going to develop it, yes or no. They could lay back onto and mine our ground. If they were to do that, they would have to pay all the development costs, and they would pay us a 5% uncapped royalty. We would love that. It'd be no further investment and a timeline to production and a royalty. That's really meant as just to show a pathway. Likely what happens is once we each know what we have, is that there's either some negotiation between ourselves or somebody replaces us to become a partner with them moving forward.
Absolutely. And again, I appreciate that detailed response there. Well, that concludes our presentation for today. I've been saying this at the end of all of our webinars, and it's because I mean it. I love the fact of seeing investors coming in here, staying active, talking in the chat rooms, asking questions, and then yourself, John, and Laura as well. I saw in the chat rooms, taking your time to be able to really answer these questions for investors, give them that in-depth understanding of what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're not doing. Sometimes that's just as powerful. So you can really say, this is our story. So I appreciate that very, very much. Lastly, for someone who has watched all of this, they want to reach out to you, where are they turning to reach out to you right now?
In this back of this presentation or on our website, or all of our news releases or contact details directly to myself. Also Laura, who manages our IR, can either answer your questions or get it to us. We're a group that likes interaction with our shareholders, so please contact us and we'll provide all the information we can. And I would like to point out that on our website are a series of videos that Laura, working with our Chief Geological Officer, Kevin Heather, have put together that describe particularly the target to the north and why we're so excited about that, and some of the technical details of how we work. And so those are available. And for those of you that would like to set up a one-on-one meeting, there's not much time left in the format here for this conference, but we're more than happy to dedicate time. It's easy for us to do in Zoom or other means right now. So please contact us, and we'll provide as much information as we can. And for those of you that are looking to position yourselves on a good copper story that's just about to initiate exciting drilling into a new area and get news flow going, and has that backstop of having a very significant amount of gold, it's well worth taking a look at AntaKori and Regulus right now.
Absolutely. Appreciate the closing words there. Well, everyone, I hope that you enjoyed. We do have a few minutes before our next presentation will be beginning. So like I've also been saying throughout all of these, take a moment, stand up, grab a coffee, relax. We'll see you back at 1:30. Thank you very much, my good man, John, and look forward to watching this story as it continues to progress throughout the rest of 2020 and beyond.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. Thank the team for us. It's an excellent format you've set up here.